Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment with me, Marina Hyde.
And me, Richard Osman. Good morning/afternoon/evening, Marina.
To whichever one you're celebrating currently. It's
Exactly.
very nice to see you. How are you?
I'm really, really well. How are you?
I'm very happy we're back in the studio together.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yes.
You've seen Taylor this week, and I've celebrated Christmas on House of Games. We might do an item about that one day, about
I think we should do.
why we celebrate Christmas in June,
Yes.
traditionally in television.
We're going to talk about Inside Out 2, which is done brilliantly.
I think we're going to talk a little bit about Taylor Swift because you went to the gig. So
I'm
I
afraid we
want
are
to hear
going
about
to
it.
have to.
But B, I think, it's become so ridiculously ubiquitous. I think we need to talk about why
Yes.
that is. What's happening, everybody?
What's happening with Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
Shall we talk first about complaints?
Yes.
Most complained about ever TV. Ofcom, the media regulator, has released its list top 10 most complained about TV events ever in its history, which is a 20-year history. And they're quite interesting, the sort of trends they show and just the business of making complaints about television. Would you like me to do the top 10 list?
I would absolutely love you to do it. I hope you've got like a kind of Fluff Freeman type bed. I say Fluff Freeman. He was the Clara Amfo of his day. For younger listeners.
Yes. Okay. The most complained about one was...
Are you starting at number one? Wow.
You've got to do... Okay, sorry.
I'm
not, Richard. Of course I'm starting at number 10 because I'm learning from you every day.
No, listen. You start where you want. If you have a way you want to do it. I just traditionally you wouldn't
you're
go,
doing it that way?
And then most excitingly of all, number 10. People listening go, well, I know what number one is. I have to keep listening because I really need to know what number 10 was.
Once again, you school me. Let's go to the coronation in 2023 because that is number 10,
Oh, is
Richard.
it?
Yes,
okay,
it
that's
is.
Good.
Now,
what's
this
number
was
one?
when the Bridgerton actress, Joa Ando, said about the balcony that it looked terribly white. So that was very complained about. In at number 9, this is going all the way back to 2005, by far the oldest complaint on the list, Jerry Springer, the opera.
Yeah.
Now, that was complaints by Christians. They said it was blasphemy. They wanted to have it prosecuted for blasphemy. At number 8, it's Dan Wootton and Lawrence Fox on...
is it?
Yes, on GB News, when Lawrence Fox insulted the journalist Ava Evans. That's quite recently. That's obviously... I can't even remember when it was. I've tried to block it out. Obviously,
yeah.
I'm a Celeb 2020. I think this was during the pandemic. By the way, people complained so much in the pandemic, which we'll come to. I think that's about animals, non-invasive species being introduced to
Yes,
Wales
I understand that.
via the medium of the Bush Tucker trial.
Yeah.
2021, Love Island, Faye's behaviour towards Teddy. Oh no, hang on, I've missed out Julia Hartley-Brewer on Talk TV. I mean,
I think
a
lot of people have missed it out.
Lots of people have missed that out, sort of rating at 20,000 or something. Then there's Love Island, Faye's behaviour towards Teddy. At number 4, Britain's Got Talent 2020, Diversity did a Black Lives Matter inspired
the fourth
performance.
most complained about in the TV history.
And people thought it was racist towards white people. They thought it was unsuitable for family audience, and a number of other things that I can't be bothered to go into.
We just had Jordan Banjo on House of Games. He was such an absolute delight.
Oh, was he?
Oh my God, he was lovely. Anyway, listen, I digress because we're talking about complained about things.
Celeb Big Brother are the next 2. They're at 3 and 2. 2018, when Roxanne Pallett claimed that Ryan Thomas had sort of punched her, but it was like some play fight thing. That became a huge thing because people said that 2007, Celebrity Big Brother is at number 2 for the Shilpa Shetty race row, which involved Danielle Lloyd, Jade Goody, I can't remember who else was involved in that. And the most complained about one is GMB, Piers Morgan saying he didn't believe Meghan Markle felt suicidal. That's the most complained about thing in Ofcom's history. But
what do we learn from this list, I wonder?
Well, one of the things which I've just said, which is that people complained a lot during the pandemic.
Right.
They were stuck at home. There were various... But also things happened in 2020. The rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, the George Floyd, all the reporting around that meant people were much more sensitive in general. People have become much more sensitive to making complaints of perceived racism, things like that. Things like swearing have fallen way back.
Yes, no one minds, do they?
No one. They don't mind the F word. I'm told that Ofcom would say that they still mind the C word and the MF word, as it is called.
I think that's right. Zander once said the MF word in front of Mary Berry in a live studio recording, and he will not do that again. I'll tell you that she did not look impressed.
She should be running the sanctions on the broadcast.
Yes, she really could. Just one look from Mary Berry,
and then you're like, oh yes. Right. Well, the number of complaints, by the way.
He had a soggy bottom after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something, a joke like that.
Now, 90% of complaints are about offence. So don't underestimate. They're not about bias. They're not about other regulatory things.
Also, most complaints between neighbours are about offence, aren't they?
I think.
Oh, gosh, I'm really sorry.
Now, never underestimate the capacity of the great British public to be offended by things. It is obviously miles and miles easier than it was to complain in the past, because of social media, because of everything is digitized. It's very easy to email, whereas before you had to. But they did used to get big postcard campaigns, things like that. You'd be sure that even back in 2005, where that was an orchestrated campaign. There are now a lot of orchestrated campaigns by people, and it might be by newspapers. But then right back when it was Saxgate, the prank calls by Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross to Andrew Sachs, only 2 people had heard that broadcast famously. And in the end, they ended up with more than 40,000 complaints because the Mail and the Express and various other people took it on board and ran a campaign every day trying to, ginger up a campaign against the BBC, to some extent against Russell Brand, whatever it was. It was just sort of troublemaking.
Doesn't sound like the Daily Mail.
It doesn't sound like it. But nowadays, because of social media, it's so much easier to disseminate that feeling of having been offended because lots of people are sharing clips anyway. We should also say that the broadcasters share a huge amount of clips for marketing. And I don't know whether or not GMB, for instance, shared the clip of that Piers Morgan saying, I don't believe that Meghan Markle was suicidal. But you can well see that they've certainly shared clips like that and used them as a marketing tool. So it's much, much easier. They think, interestingly, with Love Island, the way people complain about Love Island, although they have a sort of fig leaf for how they're complaining, what they're really trying to do is use it as a sort of proxy voting. They're complaining about a type of behaviour that never meets the threshold, but they feel like maybe I can sort of get that contestant out this other way.
But also, if you've tweeted about how annoyed you are at a contestant and that hasn't worked, you go, well, I'm going straight to Ofcom because I think
this has become a regulatory issue.
I think that was shady. I think he should have told her. I am going to hold on. I've written to my MP. They don't appear to be sitting for some reason. I don't know. Maybe there's an election on. Now I'm going to write to Ofcom.
Yes.
And then the Pope.
And in general, one of the things that people say is that you notice in the type of complaints is that people have become so much more kind of politically and emotionally literate. Mm-hmm. So there are many, many more complaints about potential harm to mental health of contestants, all those sorts of things, which you never heard complaints about in the past at all, because people didn't have the language for them in lots of ways. And now that people can see that more, and as I said, things like race, people are much more literate and much more feel that they can see offence occurring. There were a lot of complaints during the pandemic about the coverage of vaccines, which is really a sort of bit of a canary for the fact that people thought that there was a coalescing movement against a much more coherent anti-vax movement, because people were complaining that the broadcasters weren't properly covering vaccinations. They were properly covering them, but that didn't matter. You can tell quite a lot from those trends in complaint. And actually what Ofcom would always say is they want the audience to tell them what they think. I mean, that's what they're there for. So whilst there is no right not to be offended. So lots of things just don't meet the threshold for complaints. And it doesn't matter if there have been 40,000 or 4 complaints. But one of the things that is interesting is that lots of these complaints have had an effect on television. Reality TV has been hugely modified and changed by complaints, partly because we've seen how stories play out, and you see after show care has become far better, post-transmission duty of care, that exists as a thing which it never used to. And you now see that broadcasters show they're working miles more in reality TV, where you used to have the big fireworks because it was fun, or you'd see someone behaving badly, but then people complain about that, and so you now see someone being brought into the diary room or whatever, or the Bush Telegraph room or whatever, to be told off, to be talked to about their behaviour. They're shown apologising. It's much more contextualised. It's hugely affected the sort of grammar of the programmes because people know what to expect now, and Ofcom did a duty of care participants review. They kind of tried to collate all of the best practice in the industry for dealing with all of these types of shows, because obviously there are lots of very sad stories that have come out of reality TV, and things have happened, and it was generally realised that lots of things had to change, but it was such a sort of Wild West and a new form of television, which you, I'm sure, know. But it's significantly affected how those programs are now made.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating how complaints have really become sort of just a new wing of the culture war.
Yeah.
And as you say, it used to be blasphemy or swearing in the 70s, or too much sex, and that would be the complaints. And the BBC used to have their duty log, which was just a person on a phone, and the next morning there would be a printout of all the calls that had come in that night from people, and it would be 90%, I can't believe Del Boy said plonker, and it would be 5%, oh, I really, really enjoyed Antiques Roadshow. And every time there's a nice one, they'd send it on, but they were also duty bound. Every time there was a complaint, they would always send that on, and it was 30, 40 things a night on the duty log, and it would be the same people night after night after night, and developing quite a nice relationship with the people who sat on that duty desk. And now, it's a sort of complaints industrial complex, because it's very easy to complain in the same way that it's very easy to rig an online vote. I remember the first time you think, okay, this internet is going to catch on, was when Steps didn't win Best Newcomer at the Brits, but Belle and Sebastian did. I think because Belle and Sebastian had early adopter online fans, and they were able to vote. I spoke to H from Steps about it when he came on the show, because I thought, I wonder if anyone's ever spoken to you about Belle and Sebastian. And we had a long chat about it. He said, I never heard of them. I said, I know, I was excited though when they won it. I'm sorry, H, he's done all right for himself since. Yeah. But this idea now that if you're on any sort of Reddit forum or any sort of mailing list, that it's very, very easy to have a template and to complain via that template, and those numbers suddenly become meaningless. And it's difficult, because definitely things happen on TV which one should complain about. Yeah. But you get to the point where if every single time anything happens, you're getting 30,000 complaints, and they all come with the same form of words. If you're Ofcom, if you're the BBC or ITV, or if you're a production company, when do you stop paying attention? Because you can't every morning go, oh, we need to deal with every single one of these, because you're aware that there's a campaign going on. I always remember when Pointless is very rarely gets in the top 5 most complained about things at the BBC, as you might imagine. But there was like a repeat that didn't go out in order. I cannot remember why. It was some really genuinely boring bit of thing, something about one of the contestants. I can't remember what it was. And it was a day when a jackpot was given away. And so they skipped over that day, went to the next day, and everyone was furious, rightly in my opinion. But so they all complained. And I looked at the list, and it was in the top 10, and we were number 3, I think, with sort of 4,000 complaints. And number 2 was complaining that the BBC's news report was too biased towards Palestine, and that had 8,000. And number 1 was complaints that BBC's news report was too biased towards Israel, and that was like 8,100. Yeah. And that was the top 2. So there comes a point, what do you do? It's quite hard amongst that noise to find the signal of complaints.
Exactly. They have to not take the number into account.
Because almost all of these top 10s weren't upheld.
No, the biggest ever fine issued to a broadcaster was for ITV for the phone-in scandal, and I think that was £5.6 million. It
was certainly back in the day of phone lines, and I wasn't directly involved, but certainly I was near it. That was a Wild West, and it was seen for television as a new source of revenue. Yeah, and of course the world of gambling is enormously well regulated. You couldn't, for example, find out about the date of the election and then bet on it the day before. So there are enormous regulations in the gambling industry. And I think television, when they started doing those phone lines, they were going into gambling without quite realising they were going into gambling. Yeah. And so they had the slight slapdash thing of television. Have we got to get the show on tomorrow? Let's make this the question. And it became apparent that actually, hundreds of thousands of people were phoning in. They were phoning in with their money. So they were essentially running a bookmakers, and they weren't running a bookmakers in the way it should have been run. So there was a good 6 months of everyone messing that up. I don't think with bad intent, but it very soon became apparent that you think, oh yeah, I don't think this is a very good way of running
and it was tied in with people not actually winning the competitions and giving it to people in the studio or some relative. It was, as you say, a complete Wild West.
Which radio has done forever. And Blue Peter, I think, wanted to name their cat, and they had already decided they wanted to call it Socks. and whatever one, I can't remember what one, they decided to call it socks anyway. So they got in huge trouble for that.
Yeah.
But in Blue Peter's defense, that was again, there was a targeted campaign there by ravers who wanted to call the cat Cookie, which at the time was slang for ecstasy. I don't remember ecstasy being called Cookie, but I'm willing to accept it. So they essentially wanted to have a drug reference in the Blue Peter cat, and the Blue Peter people thought, we're going to ignore this and we're going to call the cat Socks instead. In the end, they did bring in another cat and called it Cookie. And that was an ecstasy reference, because the BBC was run entirely by absolute hardcore ravers. The keyboardist from Alternate used to be the exec producer. None of that is true, but that was such an outrage at the time.
Yeah.
It seems more innocent times now.
Yes. I actually have a resolved Ofcom complaint that someone
dear.
well-known got me. It's in a frame in our house. Someone gave it to my husband once, but someone well-known has stolen it. So I wouldn't say it is. And it's someone complaining to the BBC that a dog on CBBC said, "I'm a fucking dog." And the letter reply, it's really written in such sort of staid language, you know. Contrary to your suggestion that the dog said, "I'm a fucking dog," the dog on CBBC said, "I'm a talking dog." And but it's really, it's so dispassionately written.
That's fun.
It's absolutely, it's a real classic.
I bet, you know what? I bet he was both.
Yeah, I bet that they were just mucking around.
Don't you think?
Yeah, we've done an extensive analysis on the puppet. You know?
The dog's thinking, I spent enough time talking. Come on. The only time I ever complained to a TV show, I can't remember, we were making a show in the 90s, and I was watching Family Fortunes, and I love Family Fortunes. I bow to very few people in my love of Family Fortunes and the format of Family Fortunes. And they had the question, we asked 100 people to name a Spice Girl. Here are the top 5 answers. And I was like, no. That's literally who are the Spice Girls.
Yeah.
That's not the whole point of Family Fortunes, is name something that you'd find in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And there's an infinite number of answers, and we choose the top ones.
Yeah.
Spice Girls, I mean, that's just so...
No, I'm with you.
Who were the Spice Girls?
There's no way I'd fight you on this.
So we, at work, we in the early days of email, we sent off a complaint to Family Fortunes. We did not hear back. So, you know, some things have changed for the better.
Yeah.
But that feels to me
now
like...
you'd get a lovely holding boilerplate.
Yeah.
Bounce back.
And the other thing they did, it was the same episode. That's why we complained, because 2 things happened that we thought were outrageous. They said,
"Yeah, you're not an animal."
They said, "Name a word for tired." I think, yeah, good. That's a perfectly good Family Fortunes question, because we can all think of loads. And this person said knackered, right? And it went, You think, that seems surprising. I would have thought that would be in there. And then at the end, it came up, and knackered wasn't there, but cream crackered was there. And we go, well, no way are 8 people saying cream crackered.
No.
Is this boring? No way are 8 people saying cream crackered and no one is saying knackered, right? What they've done is they said, oh, knackered's a bit
they've
rude,
it.
so we'll put cream crackered. But then they accepted the answer.
Yeah.
So come on.
No, not acceptable.
Spice Girls and cream crackered, we complained to Family Fortunes. To this day, anyone who works at Family Fortunes, we have yet to have a reply.
Please dig through those archives. It's like all the politicians on the chat, on the talk shows at the moment. I'm so sorry you didn't get a reply. We'll be able to after this. So it's a bit late now. She's done a big question on LBC saying you never replied to her. So,
but it's interesting. The complaints thing is the same as people saying, "Oh, my MP didn't get back to me." If you look on Twitter of anybody who ever, any politician who ever tweets, or the Gary Linekers of this world, they will have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, immediately hundreds of replies, essentially abusing them.
Yeah.
To the extent you think, well, you know, they're no longer looking at their replies, because as a human being, why would you? I mean, you'd be insane after the first 2 years of everyone calling you a bellend. You kind of go, do you know what? I'll say the thing that I want to say about Rudiger's tackle, and then I'll move on. I'll move on with my day. And so when people say to, you know, Starmer or Sunak, oh, you didn't reply, you think, yeah, of course I didn't. I mean, it's at the point where you just think, I've been abused for so long, you know, that eventually you ignore people, and that's an issue for democracy. I think the over complaining of people.
I agree, the over complaining. In general, I have to say that whilst the politicians get a lot of criticism, a huge amount of time is spent responding to these letters and going in at quite a high level. Like, you know, if you talk to people at the BBC, their relations with people, with MPs who are asking them things in order that they can get back to their constituents on the, you know, these letters are actually taken very, very seriously in general. So it's in the cases, I think it's quite difficult with the case of sort of party leaders where obviously they get so many, but actually your average MP is taking those things very seriously,
but the BBC,
much more seriously than you might anticipate.
The BBC, by its charter, is duty-bound to reply to every single complaint. Whatever you complain about, however ridiculous or however important, they have to give them equal weight. So they literally have to reply to every single complaint they ever get. That must be a thankless job.
It's a massive job. I mean, Ofcom, the job of even regulating used to, at least now it's all digitized and they can find keywords and things like that.
Yeah.
But it used to just be banks of VHSs trying to record all the different terrestrial and other offerings, and then particularly with the public service broadcasters which they're regulating, and then honestly just having to manually rewind, try and find where in this morning. It's a bit like a sort of, it's a curse you can put on someone to say, yeah, it was on this morning, but I'm not going to tell you when. So you've got to watch the whole of this thing and try and find out when this little thing occurred in order that you can then make a judgment on whether or not it was the complaint should be upheld.
So what do we conclude from this? It's interesting that the world of complaints has completely changed, that there are now these campaigns where it becomes difficult to work out if people are really complaining or if they're jumping on one side or other of the culture wars.
Or wanting just to feel part of something.
Wanting to feel part of it. But complaints are incredibly important. And as you've hinted, it is the way we change media, and it's the way we start saying certain things have gone beyond their sell-by date and certain things need to change. And television needs to take a different attitude. As you say, reality TV is a perfect example. So they're incredibly important, but the role of the people who are having to police them is so hard because they're endlessly battling off millions and millions of sort of targeted campaigns that are
which existed
spurious.
In the past. There were orchestrated campaigns, and the Christian right organised very well, and there were certain groups that always did. But despite all of that, they still really want to hear from people because it's such an interesting view into changing currents in offence, changing, and they want to hear what people think about the television that is shown to them.
I say one fascinating thing when you look at the overnights, and every morning our friends at the overnight send us the overnights,
which we're so grateful for. Thank you very much.
Every single time someone says, right, we're having a boycott of this program because of something that happened in the program. We're going to boycott it. Everyone I know is not going to watch it.
Yeah,
I have never in my entire career in television seen a single occasion where that's had any effect whatsoever.
If anything, a boost.
It goes up a little bit, and people are still saying, people are still watching that.
No one is watching Eurovision. Well, newsflash, a lot of people watch Eurovision.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sometimes when complaints and stuff like that come about, you think usually the ratings tell you what people think of a television program. Usually, and it's that by and large remains unchanged unless something very bad happens.
Which is the case with so much of social media where you think, okay, Twitter is not real life, or Facebook is not, or maybe some people think Facebook is slightly more real life than Twitter is in terms of what it indicates. But those are the places that have become the big engines of complaint organising. So it's doubly difficult to have to strip away what really matters. But in the end, you've got to adjudicate on something, and there isn't a right not to be offended, and you've sort of got to adjudicate on whether they balanced it right. Also, the trouble is that people often on social media only see a tiny clip, normally chopped to make
out
it
of context.
Absolutely, and actually, if you think over the whole 10 minutes of this segment or whatever it was, or 4 minutes or whatever, this was far more contextualized, and the broadcaster took care of it.
By the way, where do you complain about podcasts? I don't think they're regulated, are they? Do what we want.
Not. This is a complete Wild West, as we've just evidenced.
God, I might say something controversial.
Yes. Just complain about them online.
People who say Jaffa Cakes are cakes are psychopaths.
Okay.
There you go.
I want to say don't write in, but of course we always wish to hear.
Come for me, Ofcom. Opcom. That's the podcast, Ofcom. Should we do an advert?
Yes, let's go to an advert. This episode is brought to you by Sky. Sky is home to some of the very best shows, including, and we're very excited about this, the brand new season of House of the Dragon.
That's right. Season 2, House of the Dragon, is streaming right now on Sky. You're an enormous fan, aren't you?
I am an enormous fan. And if you're not already an enormous fan, you can catch up with the first season. But the new one has just dropped, and the hype is justified. The first episode is brilliant. Can't wait to see more of what's going to happen. Now everyone's at war, and more shocking twists and turns.
There's a lot of dragon action in this this.
There's a huge amount of dragons. There's going to be 5 new dragons.
The clue's in the name, right?
Yeah, yeah. House of Many Dragons, but actual real name of the show, House of the Dragon.
Best dragon?
Best dragon. There's a massive one that hasn't been claimed yet called Vermithor. That's huge.
Vermithor.
That's a very powerful dragon. There's a little one called Moondancer.
House of the Dragon is available now exclusively on Sky.
Go to sky.com to find out more.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, Marina, you went to see Taylor Swift. So, firstly, Dish. And secondly, we're going to talk a little bit about what on earth is going on. It's like you can't move. And now we're talking about her as well. I mean, it's Taylor's world and we're just living in it.
Yeah. It is extraordinarily true. I saw her on Saturday with my daughter, who is 9. It was really interesting. I spoke to someone who went actually and was in Taylor's box the night before. This is a friend of mine called Graham. He's much older, and his daughter is a friend of Taylor's. And he said,
"What?"
Yeah, and that's why he was in Taylor's box. And he said, "This is one of the most." He said, "I've covered everyone for 50 years writing about music. This is like nothing else I've seen." Because every single word is sung back to her by every single person, and which is true. Everyone in the stadium sings every word, and there's something, I don't know. It's almost like people really mind about the words of the songs. I think I read, maybe Julie Birchall wrote this recently, saying that she's best understood Taylor Swift as a writer. She's a brilliant, brilliant writer, and the music is obviously great, but it's sort of a side issue to some extent. The words mean so much to people. Everyone around me. I mean, that's the other thing that I find extraordinary, that this woman who has got a completely irreplicable lifestyle, and she's got no peer group. You're in a category of one. You're like the main character of the planet. Everything is filtered through you. And yet, for so many people, she is the most relatable woman on earth. And people just feel that she totally understands them and they totally understand her. It's such a sleight of hand. She's one of those people, you feel that when she's looking into the audience, that she's looking directly at you.
Yeah.
And some people have that. And it just, there's
She probably was. She's probably going, is that Marina? Because can I just say I love the podcast?
She would not really have been able to see me. I was almost in a different postcode to her, but I mean, the show itself is phenomenal. You'll have seen the thing where she practices for it by doing the whole set list on a treadmill. And I just don't know. She's never off the stage for more than 2 minutes or something. It's extraordinary, but she nonetheless feels very authentic. And there was a bit where she did a set. She does the different acoustic things every night. She did Champagne Problems. And for some reason, it was a moment where everyone just went nuts and was screaming and, sending all their love over to her. And she was just like a little girl laughing on the stage and saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to listen to that one when I'm feeling down." And I was...
So what is it? Because we've had superstars before. We've had the Beatles, we've had Jackson, we've had Madonna, we've had these absolute superstars. She seems to have created a monoculture in a way where she is the star. I think Bloomberg said Taylor Swift is the music business.
Yeah.
She's done this incredible thing where she seems to have transcended all of those people and become, as you say, the sort of, certainly the cultural main story of the universe. And her music, by the way, which I love, but there's plenty of people who make music that I love.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people with good images. There are plenty of people who can sing great, who put on great shows. There are plenty of people who are relatable. What is the combination of factors that's made everybody at the same time go, this is our moment, this is the person? I think the New Yorker said you can't understand her in terms of entertainment figures. She's like Julius Caesar or Napoleon. She's sort of a world-striding colossus.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that what's interesting is that people thought that you couldn't be a celebrity like this again because they felt that things were very siloed and people were in their tribes and that you couldn't be as big as Michael Jackson or Madonna. And our producer Neil was asking me before this and saying, do you think she's bigger than those people? And I think she is. You had all the kind of weird stuff with Jackson, all the kind of like he sleeps in an oxygen chamber. He does, and he was obviously such an odd person for which we became to know quite how odd. But it wasn't the same as this. This is essentially quite mostly a happy story, but all her dramas, everyone feels that they are their own. And in an era when people hate billionaires and hate all these things, to be able to sort of still be one of those things, but still be everyone's
mate,
friend,
yes,
is very odd. I do think that part of her act, part of her shtick, or part of whatever you want to call it, all that sort of Easter egg stuff, these are the trends in cultures where people feel like if I really invest in this fandom and this type of, then things will be revealed to me that, you know, it's kind of like being a grinder.
Yeah.
You've got in gaming, you've got to, if you do that, then you'll get the Easter eggs. Your little bits of information will come only to you. You'll notice the connections. So it's a form of studies in a way.
Yeah. So you can dive as deeply as you want, because I'm very much skate along the surface of Taylor Swift, and I'm very happy to. And I've got songs on there on my you know, I listen to her on Spotify, you know, and my niece is an enormous Taylor Swift fan. But so I love where she sits in my life, which is she releases some songs that I like. But the deeper you want to go into, you can. The interesting thing about her, I think, so she's 18 years now into her recording career anyway. So like 2006, I think, was the first recording. So that would put her essentially where the Beatles were in 1981. Yeah. Okay, the Beatles is that, quite apart from Jacko and Madonna and stuff, I feel like the Beatles is the only real comparison in terms of going to a gig and every single word being screamed back at you. So she's 18 years in, and yet she seems to be going from strength to strength. And she has this very smart thing. Reinvention is the hardest thing of all, isn't it? That's why, you know, the Beatles reinvented themselves, and then eventually you fall apart. But, you know, as a solo artist, by and large, you have much more longevity. So Bowie would reinvent himself. Madonna would reinvent herself, but they would reinvent themselves.
Beyonce's reinvented herself many, many times.
Exactly right. But so in the olden days, you would reinvent yourself by a series of images. You become a new character. So Bowie would become a new character. Madonna would find a new character, and you would have that machine of a record company behind you, and it'd be understood how you would break an artist, and you'd spend your money on marketing and what have you. Taylor Swift seems to have these different eras, but the one thing that she has in common, she's always herself. And she started on MySpace, right? So she started right at the beginning of this kind of online fandom, and she understood that she had to give of herself.
She complete digital native to this type of celebrity.
Exactly that. And understanding that the thing to do is, I'm not going to dress up as a character and pretend I'm someone. I'm going to show you who I am, to whatever extent. Of course, she keeps parts of herself back. And then every couple of years, she'll become a slightly different version of herself. And she's very good with sharing her private life and these things. And so she has that incredibly intimate connection with an audience, which perhaps Madonna or Michael Jackson didn't, outside of a very small group of people. She seems to be able to relate to
it was much more, as lots of things were in those eras, it was much more the stone tablets were handed down to you, the fans. There was not that interaction. It's and this has been the same across all sorts of this, which is why she's such a sort of instinctive performer within what's happened to the media landscape. Newspapers used to be like that too, and then you started thinking, okay, no, now we might get people to be members of newspapers, we might have comments, we might have all these things, so it becomes much more interactive. And she's obviously understood that right from the very start. But there's a lot of talking in between the songs saying, thank you for letting me reinvent myself. Thank you for letting me be different.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to evolve, because we all evolve, you know. And there's that sense that you have grown up with, because she's obviously started so young, that the fandom has grown up with her. And, you know, you don't know what she'll do next. I was talking to my friend who came over from LA with his daughter to watch it in London because it was so crazy, and he had frequent flyer, and he said it was just so completely crazy, the prices in LA, that it was easier to come to London at this way. Anyway, and we were sort of saying, I mean, what next? And he said, I don't know. I mean, I think she's going to go off and, you know, maybe she'll have a family. Maybe she'll go and do something. Just take some time. Because how can you? Yeah. What are you going to do? Another tour?
Where else do you go?
Yeah.
You know, there are no other planets that can subsist this sort of culture, can they?
And that selfie you probably saw. There's a picture of Prince William, who took his George and Charlotte, his two eldest children, and there is a picture of Taylor Swift doing a selfie of her, the children, and Prince William. They went sort of privately. Now, when you see that, you have to think, there are two photographers involved here, because there is Taylor doing the selfie, and then there is, I guess, Taylor's official photographer taking a photo of that moment happening. Yeah. And putting it out, even though they've come in a private thing. Now, you know, the royal family, particularly the Waleses, are so fussy about anything like that, and they complain. You couldn't do it. I just feel like, she's just bigger than them. So she's bigger than them. So they can't. What are they going to do? Complain to Taylor Swift that she's put their photo out? I don't think so. I thought that was really significant, because anyone else did that, if they went on a private visit somewhere, there would be a huge backlash and it would be a big problem. But it's just a sort of like, I will bend the knee to you, Taylor.
Can I also say about that photograph, though? Listen, whatever one thinks about the royals, the sheer joy on those two children's face and the dad's face about having I mean, it's literally like, it's rapture. It's genuinely like a religious experience.
You
can
see,
see it.
but all around us were people having religious experiences, and
again, but I love the fact, in the papers they say it's a selfie. You think, well, the picture you're showing us isn't a selfie, because the picture you're showing us, a photographer taking a really good photograph of Taylor Swift, taking a photograph of her and the British royal family
for no pushback whatsoever.
Yeah, it's.
Can't push back against Taylor.
It's. If we're going to have someone who bestrides the world like a cultural colossus, I'd rather it was Taylor than many other people. She seems to be a force for good. She seems to be a force for women. She seems to be a force for teenage girls. Actually, it seems to be a force for good, as far as I can make out.
Like her detractors would be like, she is the ultimate capitalist. Like who else would go in? But I guess
but of course
we live in this society. So who else would go and receive her Grammy and say in the acceptance speech, oh, by the way, I've got a new album coming, and it's that's when she announced the Tortured Poets Department. She announced it in a Grammys acceptance speech, which so many people were like, really? I mean, can't you just take the award and not have to tell us it? But the trouble is, she creates so much. She's so prolific. Yeah. And then it's coming out, and by the way, it's got 33 songs or whatever it's got on it.
Always
it's a double album.
Always be closing.
Yeah, always. ABC.
Everything is sales. But, I think it's fair enough. That's the world she's living in. What's she going to do? Bring down capitalism? If anyone could at this stage, it would be her. But, whilst you're, been brought up within capitalism, you might as well take advantage of it. Greil Marcus, the cultural theorist, I suppose, says of Taylor Swift, says she represents America. She said she even has, her face represents the American flag. It says she has red lips, white skin, and blue eyes. I thought that's great, isn't it? But that's, again, the interesting thing is, we can project so much onto Taylor Swift. She leaves enough of a blank space that we can project what it is we need to be, or the problems that we have, or the issues that we have. I, as a 53-year-old man, can listen to an album she's written with The National and thought, oh, this is great because I love country music and I love The National, and I'm great that this is being listened to by a different generation of people. But if you're a 13, 14-year-old girl or a 9-year-old girl like your daughter, there are things that you can take and things that you want to be that you can see in Taylor Swift. It's an incredible mirror she holds up, but that's not by accident. It's done because she is a brilliant musician. She's a brilliant songwriter. She's a brilliant business person. I think of her like when you see Carlos Alcaraz or someone play tennis, you think, okay, you have got every single shot. So nothing without the serve.
You're an everything threat. Yeah,
you're an everything threat. The big serve is the music. So beneath everything, there's great music. If you don't like it, it doesn't matter. It's absolutely fine. You're allowed to not like things, but it is good. Right, the music is good, and then she can just. So she can do little drop shots, lobs, everything you want to do, backhand, forehand. She has absolutely got it all. And it'd be fascinating to see where it goes next, because there isn't anywhere else for it to go next.
No.
I don't think she's dumb enough to become president.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No.
I can't imagine. I think that would be beneath her.
President, very junior personnel, really, compared to No, I don't think she is. I do think it's interesting that having been with all those London boys, she's sort of gone absolutely back to the biggest sort of heartland, to be with this guy who seems great. I've heard him talk a lot. He's a really interesting person, and it's sort of interesting how he's turned out Travis Kelce, how he has, because he comes from the real sort of heartland America, and he's a sort of Mr. Americana, and it's funny that having had all these sort of digressions, she seems to have returned absolutely to that.
Everyone goes home eventually.
Yeah.
Don't they?
Yeah.
Can I, as a final coda to this, she is genuinely the biggest star in the world and all that kind of stuff. It is worth saying, because lots of people listening will be thinking, that most people genuinely don't care. Most people are not interested. But in the same way that most people are not interested in Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
The biggest television show in the world, most people are not interested. Most people are not interested in everything. But the group of people that are interested are hyper interested. Yeah. And the group of people that are interested is bigger than the group of people interested in anyone else. So if you are sitting at home thinking, I don't know what the fuss is all about, you are genuinely in the majority.
You're far from alone.
Yeah, you're absolutely far from alone. But it's fascinating that even if you can take 15% of our culture and monetize it, then you become a billionaire, which is, of course, what she did. But it was a good gig.
Oh, it was unbelievable. One for the lifetime memories.
How were the cues for the lose?
Well, a lot of people will tell you that these things are not catered for women in general, and I can tell. I'm going to shock you. It's a predominantly female crowd, although obviously it is a mixed crowd. They were quite long. We found a good one at the start, and then we're like, right, let's not drink any water now.
Yes, that's a good idea. Don't hydrate. Whatever you do, don't hydrate.
Do not hydrate.
It's like Glastonbury, where you think, just don't. Honestly, don't drink or eat anything, because just hold out as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, it was a bit like that.
Cinema has been saved. Cinema has been saved by Inside Out 2.
Which I saw on Saturday, which is terrific. And it's a Pixar movie, and it's all sorts of things. It's saved lots of things because the May box office was sort of calamitous. And tracking, which we might talk about in just a moment, but tracking is how the studios tell how well their movies are going to open. And tracking's been off for lots of things. It's been saying that lots of things would open much bigger than they did. And then lots of things have been a disappointment that they'd spent a lot of money on. Now, Inside Out 2 is already the biggest movie of the year. It opened at 155 million domestic when it was predicted. This is how off the tracking was to only anyone else would kill for this $90 million, right? So it's. And then last weekend, which we've just had when I saw it, it's really held up. It's taken another 100 million.
Nothing does that sort of numbers in its second week. That's more than Barbie did in its second week. It's the biggest animation second week in history. It's made 750 million worldwide already, so it's going to be $1 billion movie easily. And I just think it's an enormous relief to everybody in Hollywood.
Well, it's a big relief for Disney because remember, under their marquee, they've got these sort of four different labels. They've got Star Wars. They've got the legacy Disney stuff, all the things you might expect, like, I don't know, Cinderellas and Enchanteds and Moanas and all of those sorts of things. They've got Marvel and they've got Pixar, which are made Inside Out 2. Now, all of those have been struggling at different points. And Pixar particularly, people were saying, oh dear, is this the end of Pixar, or is that sort of bubble burst? Well, not at all. I don't know I haven't read the reviews of this. I don't know whether people think it's as good as the first one. For me, the concept is so amazing of Inside Out, where obviously there are the different emotions in this girl's head, Riley's head. I think that concept is so amazing. It is very hard to imagine, possibly when you first heard it, how on earth is this going to look? Sorry, explain to me how this isn't going to be incredibly clunky, but it has such a light touch. I think it's so well done. But you can see, even within this, oh my goodness, the story. But also they've done something sensible, which is that she's now going through puberty. So that's clever. When you take your audience with you in terms of the age, almost in the way that other movies that are opening, like Despicable Me has allowed its audience to sort of grow with it.
Harry Potter, weirdly.
Yes, absolutely. And so, but when Inside Out 2 was announced that they were going to do it, Amy Poehler, who's the most central to it, Disney offered her $5 million, I think, and various, back end and inducements and things like that. Now, not returning this time round as fear and disgust are Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling, who were offered $100,000 to reprise their voices. Now, yes, everybody, listeners, I get that $100,000 we'd all be very thrilled with, etc. But these are show ponies. This is like talking about footballers' salaries and saying, their ways are not our ways. That is a ridiculous amount of money to offer to the cast to return. And they didn't go back because they were basically being offered 2% of Amy Poehler's salary. But there's a slight sort of chilling thought to that, which is that it didn't really matter.
Yes. I've always thought that with animation. I think no one... Like, the kids don't know who these, and even me, I would watch a whole thing. I go, I have to watch the end just so I can work out who that is, and it'll be someone I know very well. You think, but it's sort of just get a really good actor.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that Mindy Kaling, she was so great as discussed, but I would have thought that she was a bit of a deal breaker. But Phyllis Smith, who voices Sadness, who's got that, Phyllis from The Office, who's got that wonderful voice, she's gone, she returned. But what they've effectively said is, well, we can replace you and we don't have to pay you, even on something that was such a big hit the first time round. So I think that is quite chilling.
It's almost like the animators and the writers and the director are the talent there.
Yeah, well,
isn't it?
I don't know. I really don't like to think of it like that because I do think voice artistry is an incredible thing. And I think I think that's slightly chilling for actors to be told that when something's been that big a hit to be offered that kind of money, which within the context of Hollywood is a tiny amount.
But is it not less chilling for actors who don't already have names from sitcoms to say, actually, you could come in and be in the biggest movie of the year?
Yeah, I think you could say that. Although, anyway. But why is it why is the tracking of movies so off, and what is tracking? Can I just talk a little bit about tracking? It is quite interesting. Tracking is basically a way for studios to gauge how well their movie's going to open, and in a sense, like, how well is your marketing working?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so because you think you're taking hundreds of millions of dollar bet sometimes, and even so, you're always taking a tens of $1 million bet. And nobody knows anything, as we famously know about Hollywood. So could somebody tell me something? I would like to have some idea of what it's going to be.
Like opinion polls for the election.
Yes, which again I think is significant. They are also very off this year. People are not sure. You're getting different polls all on the US election. In our own election in the UK, you're seeing people say, we know it will be a Labour win, but we don't know whether it will be by 150 seats or will it be these huge numbers that we haven't really seen. So people are becoming harder to poll in lots of different ways. And tracking, I think, is part of that. It's just a way of polling the movie audience. But how do they do it? There are people, I was listening to this really interesting interview the other day with the Park journalist Matt Bellamy was interviewing this guy who has he's got a very sophisticated neural network, and he works with studios before they even cast their movies. So they say, this is the concept, and then he'll say, this is how much your movie would be on tracking to make if it had no stars. And then they're like, okay, but what about we put one of the Stranger Things kids, and then he'll say, yeah, it's going to make even less. So you're basically paying one of the Stranger Things. He didn't say the Stranger Things kids. I'm just giving them as an example. You're paying them $3 million to make your movie less attractive.
Yeah. What if we had Bill Hader doing that same voice again?
Well then, yeah. So that's probably what happened. Is they thought it doesn't matter. We've realised it doesn't matter. So anyway, one of the things, once it's cast and it's happening, then they start tracking. Now, if more than 6 weeks out, there's something called unaided awareness. So someone knows your movie's coming out without prompting. Now, my kids said to me for a long time, when's Inside Out 2 out? When's it out? They know about it. They're fully aware of it. And there'll be other movies coming this year, like Deadpool and Wolverine, Despicable Me 4, that everyone knows, or not everyone knows, but lots of people who are interested know they're coming. Now, if it's more than 6 weeks out and they know about it at all, that's part of what correlates to a strong opening box office. Total awareness. Do they have an idea of when it's opening? Now, if you think, oh, hang on, that's coming out on, I don't know, July the 24th, then that's amazing. You know, you can say that you might, that's definite interest. They might see it, maybe not the day it comes out, but they'll see it around that time. First choice, this is a very good thing. They give you a smorgasbord of what movies are coming out. And if you pick that one, then that, again, is a very positive thing. And then they sort all these answers by gender. So you've got age 25, by the way, is the cutoff. So you've got females under 25, females over 25, males under 25, males over 25. Those are the 4 quadrants. So when we talk about a 4-quadrant movie, so you might say something in the MCU is a 4-quadrant movie. It's got to appeal to all of those things. And by the way, if they're very expensive, it needs to be a 4-quadrant movie.
I'm going to start referring to myself as a male over 25.
Yeah, I'm going to refer to you as a 4-quadrant presenter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just the quadruple threat. And you can also track, weirdly, online ticket sales is still a thing. I mean, I do not pre-book things with a movie theatre when I'm not thinking, oh, I must be there on the first day of Deadpool and Wolverine. But people do actually still do this, and it is a thing. Joker, Folie à Deux, which is coming out later in the year, which will be, Beetlejuice. This is something that has very, very strong tracking. People love Jenna Ortega. Young people love Jenna Ortega. And that IP, by the way, is ancient. That's from when I was a little girl.
Yeah, and it wasn't super massive. People loved it, but it wasn't.
It was a cult sort of, it's Tim Burton, it's Michael Keaton. It's not, but that, because of Jenna Ortega, is tracking really well. So that, I think, will be one of those movies.
See, I keep thinking you're saying General Ortega. I think we're in Nicaragua, but I know Jenna Ortega is one of the new generation of huge stars.
And not related to Manuel.
So I think it was Noriega, wasn't it? But it sounds like General Ortega.
Yeah.
But the long and short of it is, movies have been saved. Again.
They have been saved, and it makes people feel positive about things that are coming up. But what's interesting is that the tracking is so off.
Yes.
And I do think it's interesting, and I do think you can see this in political polls as well, that people are becoming not necessarily more volatile, but harder to poll and harder to understand. And there are different, as I say, this person with this sort of sophisticated neural network is a different way of looking at how things might do. But I think that the technology or the science of it is creaking a bit, and that they're going to have to update their models and how they do it.
There's an obsession now, isn't it, with knowing what's going to happen in the future. Polls are that. Movies, of course, have that with tracking. And movies, by the way, it's understandable because any company that ever spends a lot of money on a launch of any product is desperately trying to find out how it's going to do before it does do. But, that's why people like sport and things. You just don't know what's going to happen when it begins, do you?
You don't. And
so those other movie stories we have
but
about...
you know when it's on.
Yes.
And that's the thing. You see, you're so
key.
lucky with sport because people know exactly when it's on. They know they're not going to miss it. That is something that people care so much about. Whereas even people who would count themselves as kind of really big fans of certain movie franchises might not know the day they open. And, so it is different. And you really need to kind of keep a track of that audience and make sure that your marketing that you spend maybe more than the movie's entire budget on is actually reaching them. Because if it's not, something's going wrong.
Yeah. But so listen, I think we're probably out of time, but next week we'll talk about the Trump movie and the AI movie, which is a fascinating story, and the Coppola movie as well, because they're all really good stories. But I think people's poor dogs are being overwalked because of the length of this. But that was a load of fun. Don't forget, we got a questions and answers edition on Thursday. Ask us all sorts of questions.
Very much so. The rest is entertainment@gmail.com is the address.
gmail.com. Someone was asking about summer read recommendations, so maybe we'll do that as something on the questions and answers one. That'd be nice. That was loads of fun. I'm very jealous that you saw Taylor Swift. I'm going to talk more about my Christmas experience as well at some point.
Oh, yes, please. Can we do that next week?
Of course we can. And we'll see everybody on Thursday.
See you then.